This is a conversation I had with someone who left a 1-star review on a watch that I sold him on eBay. So the background to this is I do a little bit of watch flipping. Like I'll be transparent. Like I have a source for Lacos where if I buy them in bulk, I get really deep discounts, and I'll just turn around and flip them on eBay for a profit. Not a huge margin because I try to be, and I think I almost always am, pretty much the absolute cheapest price that you can find Lacos at on eBay or also sometimes on forums and so on, Reddit. It's just a fun little side hustle that I do. You know, it's one way I participate in this hobby. It's cool. I get to handle a lot of watches, sell some watches to other watch enthusiasts, get them a good deal. And someone bought a Laco from me, left me a positive seller feedback, which I appreciated, but he also left a 1-star review on the Laco Aachen 42, which is a very, very popular watch. It sells extremely easily. In fact, if you search best budget Flieger on YouTube, I think the first result that comes up is a review of the Aachen 42 by a very big watch YouTuber. So it's very easy for me to sell this watch. Even after he left a 1-star review, it continued to sell very well. And I think he made some good points in that review, though. Like I personally would probably not give the watch 1 star. Like I would give it more than 1 star myself if I was reviewing it. But I thought he made some very fair points, and he covered some stuff that isn't really talked about when people talk about the Laco Aachen on YouTube. So I reached out to him and asked him if he wanted to have a conversation, share with us all why he left that, he felt the watch only deserved 1 star. And it turned out to be a really interesting conversation, not only about the Laco Aachen, Laco budget Fliegers, but also about, more broadly, like what we value in watches, provenance, the history of watches, and also how he uses watches in his job. So this gentleman, Ed, is a paramedic, and we talked about how he uses watches as part of his job, how he uses pocket watches even sometimes as part of his job. So very interesting talk, polite person. So, I have no hard feelings about the review. And like I said, I felt like he made some good points, even if I might not necessarily agree with, the 1 star. And I just want to get that information out there because I feel like when someone buys a watch from me, I want to make sure that they know what they're getting. So I think this was a very interesting conversation, and I think you will as well. So let's get into it.
Ed, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, what kind of watches you're into and why you decided to buy a Laco?
Okay, I'm a paramedic. I've been a paramedic for over 30 years, and I chose the Laco Pilot B style because it's so easy to read the minutes, and as a critical care paramedic, I have medications that have to be timed very tightly. So the larger hands with the large minutes there are easy for that, and it was designed obviously for wartime use, not medicine, but it's a good, easy to read watch. It is a fairly pricey watch. It's a $400 watch. You can buy a good Timex quartz watch for $32.
Right.
So this is a serious investment, but for work, yes. I bought it, and it does perform as a watch that is easily read, and it works out well. It is good for that. I am disappointed in several factors with the watch.
Hold on, before we get into that, you mentioned being a paramedic. Like Timex is a great, very reliable quartz brand. A great brand, a lot of history. Do you own other watches? Are you into watches in general, or is it just more specifically, this is a cool design for a watch, I want this watch?
Oh, I have a number of watches, mainly pocket watches. I do prefer pocket watches, but they're kind of hard when patients are on 7 drugs plus the vent to pull out a pocket watch and start looking at things. They're just not very practical.
Yeah.
I have a 1858 Waltham key wound that is very enjoyable. It's actually the last of the run from the watch that the Gettysburg Association gave to Lincoln for the Gettysburg Address.
Very
So
cool.
that's a cool thing.
Yeah.
I have my grandfather's pocket watch, a Hamilton 16 S16 that I just had rebuilt recently.
All right.
Um,
So you've got a collection there. Like you've got some nice pieces, you know. Like it sounds like a bit more on the vintage side, but like you know, you are into watches. It's
oh
not just
yes,
like, hey, I need to get something to tell the time when I'm at work.
correct.
All right. All right. Well, and okay, so you mentioned some disappointments. Like obviously, I mean, legibility is in fact one of the greatest things about I mean, this is true of all the Fliegers Type B bot dials. Like very easy to read the time. This is a 39 millimeter. It's just the one I happen to have on here. But 42, the bigger one, even more legible. But yeah, let's talk about why you were disappointed when you got the watch.
Okay. Um, it's a mechanical watch, and I do prefer mechanical over batteries. Batteries have this annoying habit of dying at the most inopportune time. Just you're not paying attention to it, and all of a sudden the battery's dead. Okay, it takes 10 minutes to replace it, but when you're again with a critical patient, that's not the time for it.
Right.
So I will prefer mechanicals. The Laco 42 is a automatic watch. Unfortunately, the movement is not German made, which isn't a big turnoff or anything, but it's one of the cheapest ones out there that they currently have. It's been noted in their own reviews that they have a problem with the second hand on that. It's supposed to be hackable. It is a hackable watch, but when your second hand jumps up to 20 seconds a day, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, as you were saying, this is actually a Miota movement. It's a Miota 8000 series movement. They recently upgraded it to give it that hacking. And I mean, made in Germany, it says, I'm trying to focus right here. It says made in Germany around the dial. Like made in Germany is one of those things where it's not as strict as even Swiss made, right? So I assume that whatever the legal requirements are for made in Germany, having a German made movement is not one of them because they sell a lot of watches with Swiss movements, Japanese movements in this case.
Correct. And you can get good Japanese movements out there. The NH35, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Right. Is a good Japanese movement. It's of the quote unquote lower quality, but that's pretty accurate. That's a plus or minus 10 seconds a day movement.
Mm-hmm.
And you can buy those fairly cheaply, around $35 to $50, depending how well you shop.
Mm-hmm.
So they are definitely out there.
What kind of accuracy were you getting on your piece?
I originally was getting 40 seconds a day. It was losing 40 seconds easily.
Wow.
It's finally settled down to about 20 seconds a day, which is tolerable. But
Mm-hmm.
again, in the digital age, especially when I look back at the mechanicals I have, that Waltham I spoke about, that watch only
Mm-hmm.
loses 5 seconds a day.
Yeah.
That hasn't been rebuilt or serviced in God knows how long. It was built in the 1860s, so we're talking a watch that's 150 years old. The technology's there.
Yeah.
And I didn't pay $400 for it either. I barely paid $100.
I don't think you paid me quite $400 either, but yeah,
No.
I mean, but the point is taken. Like it retails for $400 to $10. So, you know, in the universe of luxury watches, it might not be a lot, but it's objectively a lot of money, right? Like if you ask someone to spend $400 on a watch, that's and you can buy a $20 Timex that tells time really well. Like that is a lot of money to ask for. I think that's definitely true.
Yes. I like the hackable. Again, it's a necessary. It's easily legible, but I think part of it is they're trading on their brand.
Yeah.
You're talking about a watch that was made famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, from World War II.
Right.
I take a more neutral point of view. It's a tool. The people that are responsible were dealt with.
Right.
So I don't hold it against a tool.
Mm-hmm.
But just like the Waltham watches you can buy today are trading on the name recognition, is the quality there? I
Yeah.
I can't speak for the modern Walthams. I haven't bought one, but the Laco, I don't believe the quality is there on these watches. They go with a lower grade dial. The movement, as I pointed out earlier, is definitely cheap. It's a cheap end watch. The blued hands on the higher end model, yes, they are tough to get. There's no doubt about that. You have to be very careful when you're firing those to get the blued hands. But they can be replaced easily for $100. So what are you getting for the money?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you still wearing that Laco, or is it just in a sock drawer? Like, what did you end up doing with that watch?
I do wear it because, again, I do critical care work. It's not my at-home carry or wear, depending on the season. But for work, yes, I do. I'm not buying another Pilot B watch, and there are ones similar that they're asking $200 for, with a better quality movement from smaller micro brands.
Right, right. Like brands that don't have the same kind of, you know, provenance or heritage as Laco, which is, again,
Correct.
as you were alluding to earlier, it's kind of a mixed bag anyhow, because the particular provenance of this watch is World War II, is the Luftwaffe, that, you know, people love provenance so much in the watch world that, in a sense, that helps it out. All right, so yeah, it sounds like the accuracy of the piece that you got, it was really not great, and not so not quite your expectation, and that the hacking. I don't know if this is something that this piece has, but some of the Miyota movements, Miyota Lacos that I've had, when you hack it, like the seconds hand will kind of quiver as you're pushing in and out the stem. It looks like this one isn't going to do it. And you got one that does that?
It jumps.
Yeah.
It will jump 3 to 5 seconds on this one I have.
Right, as you're pulling it out. Yeah, I have seen that on quite a few of the Lacos that have come through. I guess this one is one of the good ones. Yeah, I mean, I think those are all pretty fair points, like, to be completely honest. Specs, right? Hey, it's a Miyota movement, et cetera, et cetera. But people don't always realize, like, what that actually means. And the other thing is, like, and this is the thing about YouTube reviews, is the thing about the cheaper quality is, a lot of times, like, there are individual units that are extremely good, you know, and extremely accurate, because it just means that when it's cheaper, it just means the QC has a wider range, right? So you got one that was -40, which is atrocious, but technically within spec for the Miyota, right? And there are Lacos that that are out there that I've gone through that are much more accurate than that. And it's just like, well, the quality control on the Miyota is, there's going to be a range. They don't regulate it very much on Laco's end. So some are going to be super accurate, some are going to be super inaccurate. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you really drew a not so great one with the -40. Although I'm glad to hear that it settled down a bit.
It happens. It is one of those. Obviously, it's not your fault. As you said,
Yeah,
quality
I mean,
control.
right. But I do wish that some of these things were discussed a bit more. Like when people talk about the watch, like, because I don't personally, like, for me, accuracy is not huge, and I don't mind a particularly cheap movement if I know that's what I'm getting. You know, like the watch I'm wearing now is a Baltic, which is the watch that is like $800 brand new. Like, if you buy it from Baltic, and it has a Miyota in it. It has a Miyota, like, it's a 9000 series Miyota movement, so it's like a little better, but it is a cheap movement, and you can tell it's a cheap movement when you're operating the watch, like when you're winding it and stuff like that. And I bought this watch after reading kind of a negative review of it, actually, like a negative review kind of highlighting all the downsides of buying this watch, of having such a cheap movement in a relatively expensive watch. But the guy who wrote the review was like, well, all that said, it's still a beautiful watch. And I thought so too. And so I'm like, well, if that's the worst thing about it, then I feel like, yeah, I like the look of it so much. I'm going to get this watch, and it's one of my favorite watches, even knowing all its flaws. But I think that's like the key. Like if you like are expecting a certain thing and you get something else, like that's going to be way more disappointing than if you kind of go in with the understanding of like, this is what to expect from this watch and from this timepiece, which is why, in a way, like I'm glad like you wrote that review. The I mean, it doesn't seem to have impacted my ability to sell the Laco. So like it doesn't like, and it's all informative stuff, like everything you said is just, it's objectively true. Like the things that you've just said, like I can't say any of that stuff is untrue. Like you get the watch because people like, yes, the design is the type B Flieger design, very readable. Laco is that brand that has a lot of history with Fliegers, and that's pretty much why people get it. You just have to be aware that the movement's not the greatest. Like it's honestly not the greatest. Although I think that in its defense, they do a good job making it look pretty good. Like it's got those Geneva stripes and everything. Like I was surprised looking at the movement. Like, like, hey, it's surprisingly well decorated for such a cheap movement.
Yes, it is a good looking watch, and no doubt when it comes time to rebuild it in about 10 years, I am going to upgrade the movement and keep it.
Oh yeah, okay.
I truly do believe that I sold one of these watches for you. A number of nurses have complimented me on it and said, "Hey, this is what we need. Where did you get it?"
Yeah. But I mean, it's that dial design. That dial is so legible. I can see why in your, like, and it doesn't have any extra complications. It's just like, hey, bam, read the time,
Yes, and that's exactly what it's for. As a medic, I look for tools that are practical. I do want them to be good looking, or at least somewhat decent to look at, but they have to function.
Right.
So it is a compromise. As you said, do you like the look of the watches? There are some gorgeous watches out there that I've seen. But for my line of work, I would never be able to wear it. They're too hard to read. It just doesn't meet my needs.
Got it. Yeah. And that's something else that people should be aware of, is just like the difference between the higher end. This one is one with the blue dial, but they also have the more classic Flieger with the more classic strap and black dial and all of that. So the blue seconds hands, this would be an ETA movement, so substantially more accurate. And this is probably not something you care so much about, as you sound like you're much more practical minded with your watch purchases. But the fact that the thing that strikes me most about this quality wise is that the beat rate on it is just 3 hertz. So the seconds hand is like, and 3 hertz is like a standard beat rate, but this is just one of my things, is I like the smoother sweeping seconds hand. So on the ETA, it's going to be a 4 hertz movement. So the seconds hand is going to sweep a bit more gracefully than the 3 hertz. Like it just looks jerkier to me. And that's always like, and there are some very high end movements that have the slower beat rate, but I don't know, maybe on the cheaper movements, it's jerkier than even a normal 3 hertz would be. I don't know if that's just subjective or just like because I'm biased because I know it's a cheap movement, but it's just not as relaxing to look at for me as a smoother sweeping seconds hand that you would get on like a higher end movement. This one's an ETA movement, the higher end Laco.
Yes, I've seen it. To me, that doesn't matter so much. The jerkiness, as a pocket watch aficionado, those old movements, they were jerky.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
No, the higher end, there are some benefits on there. The stem is definitely easier to pull and wind. It has that, I guess they call it an onion stem, versus the more flush. Which is a nice
that's
benefit.
Right. So, so you can see this one has like, it's easier to pull out because it just has the way that the stem fits the case. there's more clearance for your fingers to get in there and just kind of pull it out and wind it and so on. Whereas this one that doesn't really exist, which is strange. I mean, I assume it costs the same amount of money to make, but you know, for whatever reason, I'm sure that this is much more mass produced than the slightly higher end. Laco calls this the Pilot's Watch Original line. So these are retail for over $1,000. Although like gray market from a seller such as myself, you can get it for a chunk less. Yeah. All right. Actually, this turned out to be like a super interesting, because I didn't know you were a paramedic, but I didn't know you were using it like so functionally. But it's always cool to talk to someone who's using watches in such a way for basically their original intended purpose, and for whom the timekeeping is kind of still the point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have too much to say other than like everything you said is true and accurate. I hope people that are buying my watches are aware of that stuff, you know? Like I hope that you're aware that you could get one that's the range, like when they say it's up to -40, just because some YouTuber got one that was like -5 and they said, hey, I'm getting like, you know, 5 seconds a day accuracy, doesn't mean you're gonna get that, right? Like you could get one that is within the spec. You know, if you like the look of the watch and you like the brand, I think I do think it's a good looking watch. Like you said, it's very attractive. So you can buy it for that, but just be aware of kind of, it's not perfect. And here we have someone who, you know, shared very clearly the ways in which it's not perfect. So I mean, just in general, are you looking to get any more watches? Like, what's next for you in the whole? Have you gotten any more watches besides the Laco in the past couple months?
My wife's not listening, but yes, I have a. There is a Gotham pocket watch coming, hopefully today or Monday. It's a quartz one, but it's based on the Waltham World War II watch. The difference is, instead of the small second hand, he went with a large sweep second hand, but it's kind of a tribute to that Waltham pocket watch that was carried by the soldiers and sailors in World War II.
Cool.
And it's very legible, very easy to read, and that will be a nice little watch to have when I don't need to count minutes exactly and such, and I just want to be able to tell time, and I'm being too lazy to wind a watch and find the right key for a key wound or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you really can't beat the convenience of quartz. Like, let's be honest, you know, that technology is so convenient. Though it is true, like you said, sometimes it just stops and at the worst times. So you're actually the first person I've talked to who's like so seriously into pocket watches in this way. Do you carry them, or like on your person, or how do you use them?
Yes, I do. Actually,
Cool.
let me show you what I carried, and I just got off of a 28-hour shift. Because it's cold, I've swapped out of a wristwatch because I'm just never going to get to it. And hopefully you can see it there.
Oh, neat. Hey, hold on 1 second. Let me pin your video. There we go. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
The one you're talking about, or is this one of your other pieces?
And this is a Gotham pocket watch. I believe it's 17 joules. It is a homage to the railroad pocket watches. It's about a size 17. And except for not being a lever set, it meets just about all the original specifications.
Oh.
So,
yeah, I mean, also, of course, it's legible. It's a giant watch because it's pocket watch. Yeah, very cool. So you carry it on your person. You like just take it out when you need to tell time. Like,
yes,
that's how you would use it.
Oh yes,
all right.
Yes. I have a injury to my left arm from when I was a stupid kid, and wristwatches can be painful at times, especially in the colder weather. So that's why I carried pocket watches, and they are stylish.
Yeah, and it's definitely different. Like, it's not something you see every day. Like I've talked to a lot of watch people. That's kind of the main reason I like the hobby. I think just talking to people and talking about how they're using their watches. But you're the first person I've talked to who's actually like using pocket watches in that way, as opposed to like having one and just putting it, you know, in a watch box or something. But that's cool. I mean, I guess it makes sense for you, right? Because you got to be able to tell the time, and I guess you know, if sometimes it's too cold to wear a wristwatch, it makes sense to just have one in your pocket.
Yes, and it's fairly protected. So life is good, and sometimes with a patient who is agitated, very upset, they get distracted by they look at the watch and say, "Hey, my father had one like that," and that distraction gives me an opening to find out what's going on and ask questions, because people are nervous, and you have a bunch of strangers pounding into their house at dark 30, what to them is the worst part of their life so far.
Right.
I'll use whatever I can to get that opening to calm people down and talk to me, and then we can figure out what we have to do to help them.
Wow, that's so interesting. But I mean, you're right. Like in a time like that, like anything you can use to just have a relatively normal conversation with someone, or just like a point of reference, you know, to start that conversation on that level would be great. Wow, but that's so cool. What other watches do you wear for work?
I have the Timex A11 Homage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a quartz one, and I have a chronicler automatic that I wear at times for work. Not too often, because while it's a pilot watch, it is at times tough to get the minutes down properly on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about it for work. For time off, I have a couple Illinois. I have a Ball Railroad grade watch. So it depends on the day. We rotate them around.
Yeah. I mean, you've definitely got it's not the kind of collection I would normally see on Reddit or even at Watch Meetups and stuff, but it's cool that, like, for everyone, you know, they've got their own passions, and they kind of pursue that passion. Okay. Well, yeah, it was really great to talk to you, man. And I'm really glad we had this conversation, just because, I mean, like I said, I always like talking to watch people, but you've got an interesting story. You're using your watches for interesting things. Obviously, I wish you had gotten a better watch, especially knowing what you're using it for. You know, I just wish, like, your accuracy was a little better. Like, maybe you got one of the better ones, but it's not the way it worked out. But I'm glad we're getting this. We did this video. You know, that I'm glad you had a chance to share with me how you felt about it, and point out kind of the things that could be better on that watch.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned you just came off of a 24-hour shift, so I guess you're gonna go get some sleep.
Yes, that is the plan.
Yeah. All right. Well, we appreciate everything you first responders do. So have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.